This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 147 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I've got another special episode today, an interview with someone I have known for a very long time, since not long after I started blogging, but he's become much more famous in the blogging world and the travel writing world and all of it than me. So many of you will already know Nomadic Matt, Matt Kepnes. And he's got a new book coming out soon, which prompted me to say, hey, Matt, it's finally time for us to have that chat we've been talking about having for the podcast. So we have got that chat today, and it was really good to talk with Matt about, a bunch of different things related to his kind of travel style and my kind of travel style. They overlap a fair bit. What he's up to, what he's been up to lately, including some time in Paris, which was interesting, and what his plans for the near future are, and lots of detours along the way. What I do like about Matt is that he is how he portrays himself to be. He's not a glamorous influencer taking fancy, those fancy Instagram influencer kind of pictures on tops of buildings or whatever. He likes to travel in a fairly, authentic kind of, get in with the way locals do it kind of way. In fact, it was, I don't know how long ago now, maybe 3 or 4 years, we caught up here in Perth, and, just exactly like his brand suggests. Where did we catch up? I picked him up from a youth hostel here in Perth. So he still likes to travel in that authentic way, even though he could easily be staying at, somewhere fancy, but he doesn't like to, similarly to me. And I respect that and like that. Anyway, I will stop yabbering on and let you listen to the conversation I recently had with Nomadic Matt. I've known you for a long, long time, and I remember that we actually met online back when we were both writing for sites like Vagabondish back like thousands of years ago, it feels like. But since then, you went on to become like completely famous, and I'm just still sitting here in Perth. But, that's okay. But maybe to get everyone else up to speed who's listening, can you just give me a few sentences about your website and your travel career and how that's all developed over the past decade or so?
Yeah, I remember those days on Vagabondish, Matador. What was the one that predated Brave New Traveler?
Oh, yeah. Gosh, you got a better memory than me. Wow.
Those were the days.
Weren't they? Pre-social media days, I kind of miss that. Like when all we could do was comment on on each other's blogs, and that was it. I kind of like that.
Yeah, back then there was no Twitter, Pinterest.
Not even Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook was still only for college students.
Yeah, then. Exactly. That's right.
I don't even think they had Facebook pages.
Nope.
When did YouTube come? 2007. So
something like that. Yeah.
So yeah, those were the good old days,
weren't they?
Now all these kids gotta get off our lawn.
I know. But you're still going strong. So, I mean, what have you been doing all these years? You started off with just a website.
Yeah. So, I started Nomadic Matt as a way to sort of just freelance, doing what we did back then. It was sort of my online resume. Mm-hmm. It was where people could go to see my writing and see where I've been featured and then hopefully hire me. But the more I blogged, the more I sort of blogged about just backpacking. And at that time, there weren't a lot of like how-to backpack blogs. So I started to really focus on SEO and the nuts and bolts. And then it just sort of started to pay my bills independently of all these like little articles we were writing online. Mm-hmm. So I just focused on that. And here we are 11 years later, 11 and a half years later. And now, I still maintain that original focus. The website is still about how to travel the world on a budget, and how to do that either short term or long term. But it's mostly about that backpacker long term travel lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you still often travel that way, don't you? I mean, you're not like, I don't see you in 5-star luxury hotels too often.
No, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I'm still budgeting around. I still stay in hostels, not as many dorm beds as I used to.
Oh, fair enough.
Because I like to sleep.
Yeah.
But I still stay in 1 to 2 star places, hostel dorm rooms. Once in a while, if the destination's still expensive, otherwise hostel private rooms and points. But I mean, I like to budget travel. It feels more authentic that way. I feel like I'm in it, whereas I feel like if I'm in like a big hotel or resort, I'm just sort of gated off from the destination I'm in. So I just don't like it. Plus, I'm cheap. And to be honest, like if I'm only going to be in the place for 6-7 hours a day and I'm going to be asleep that whole time, why am I going to spend all this money for luxury I'm not going to use?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, you're a man after my own heart. I agree with all of that completely. On the occasion when I stay in a fancier hotel for work or something, I always feel like I could be anywhere, you get the occasional great hotel, but a lot of them just, you close your eyes and who knows, you could be in any continent, and I don't feel like I'm really traveling when I'm somewhere like that.
People go to the Sheratons and the Hiltons of the world because there's similarity. People, it's sort of like McDonald's. You go to McDonald's because you know what you're going to get. These big hotel chains and these big resorts, you know what you're going to get. And it's the same thing everywhere. You walk into a Sheraton, it's always a Sheraton. You know what it is. You're right. It misses that character.
Yeah, exactly. And, I guess there's people who are happy to travel that way, and that's good. But you and I are not that type for sure, which actually leads me on quite nicely to my next question. So obviously this is the Thoughtful Travel podcast, and so we often talk about what it means to be a thoughtful traveller. And, of course, there's no one right answer. Everyone has kind of their own ideas about what it means to travel thoughtfully. But what do you think makes a thoughtful traveller?
I think, if you're going to be a thoughtful traveler, as you say, it's about respect and curiosity. A thoughtful traveler is someone who respects the local cultures and customs. You may not agree with all of them, but if you're going to be in someone's home, you should respect their rules, even if you don't agree with all the rules. It's about being respectful of people's environment and homes. You have all these influencers now who like to take pictures on top of like people's houses in Santorini, even though the sign says, "Please do not step on our roof." I mean, imagine if like you're just like you walk outside and like somebody's on your roof trying to take like a picture of Perth, and you're like, "What the hell? Get off my roof!"
First in Perth, I'd be really surprised. But you're right, exactly that. Like it's insanity that's the way people act sometimes.
It's like, hey, people still live here. Get down. Sorry, man. I gotta do for the gram. That's kind of not thoughtful traveler.
No.
Not littering and all that stuff, but also being, curious, not staying in a resort or a hotel for the entirety of your trip. Doing things that get you into the local rhythm of the city. Public transportation, markets, walking around, laying in a park, even going to a library, a bookstore, a supermarket, some hole-in-the-wall restaurant. Not just sort of all the luxury stuff that locals don't do. If I went to Perth and I only stayed at the fanciest hotel and ate the fanciest food, well, I'd only be doing stuff like the rich people do. And that's a section of Perth, but that's not like the real Perth in the sense that that's not what most people do. And so I feel like being a thoughtful traveler is about doing what the masses do and trying to get into the rhythm of the city as much as possible. And that's why I like budget travel so much, because those two things really dovetail together. It's very much about eating local street food and walking around and taking public transportation, as much as is once in a while splurging on, some unique restaurant. Like I wouldn't go, if I could get into Massimo Dutti, or not Dutti, Massimo, like the famous chef in Italy. If I could get into his like restaurant that I always see on Chef's Table, yeah, I would definitely go there. I mean, that's a unique experience. But like, I'm just not going to like walk into some high-end steakhouse in New York that could be anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's really about doing a lot of things as the locals do, because that's how you really experience a place and what it's really like. Which gets me onto this topic of meeting local people and even also, a lot of the fun of travel is the people you meet. So can you maybe tell me about someone you've met on your travels who's been significant, maybe changed the way you think about something? I just love, hearing about the connections people make when they travel.
Well, after 13 years on the road, there's a lot of people. But let me pick out a couple. There's the 5 people I met that inspired the original trip. Those are the backpackers I met in Chiang Mai in like 2005. And, they were the first people that sort of hooked me onto the idea of long-term travel and something that was possible. Like there is a way to travel beyond what we knew in the States. This idea of like a 2-week holiday. And in the States, we have a vacation culture. We don't have a travel culture, but less so now, because now like Instagram and social media has made being a digital nomad or, a long-term traveler a little bit more socially acceptable. Way back then, it was like, you're going to quit your job and do what? Whereas like, here in Australia, like everyone takes a gap year or, you're
going to quit your job, but you'll probably come back and get another one sometime. It's just, we roll a bit differently here.
Yeah. And even back in 2005, that was the same thing too.
Mm-hmm.
I met Europeans, Canadians, Brits, Aussies, Kiwis, very rarely the long-term American traveler. So those people are very influential. There's a guy named Greg. He and I met in Amsterdam. He was a poker player. I was playing poker. I was like, why does this guy want to hang out with me when I have all this money? Very like, I don't know about this, bro. But over a while, I actually ended up staying in Amsterdam playing poker for an extended period of time. And him and I became friends, and he was sort of the first person to make me realize it's okay to trust strangers. And, we're taught a lot in the States not to trust strangers. Yeah. So it's sort of like this idea that not everyone is bad. When you're 25 and you just left the States for the first time, like you kind of need that lesson.
Absolutely. That's right. It turns out that like 99.9% of people are good. But when you're a kid growing up, same here in Australia, we, got that same message that you've got to beware of strangers. And it turns out really strangers are just friends you haven't talked to yet most of the time.
Yeah. There's that quote. Yeah. So, those are a couple. There's my buddy Z, who opened me up to the world, and that is Bangkok. I moved to Bangkok, didn't know anybody, and then my friend Amanda was like, I'm sick of you complaining. So meet my friend Z. He might be able to help. And so he, took me under his wing and sort of introduced me to expat culture around Bangkok, and I made friends, got a girlfriend. And he was really the gatekeeper there. So there's sort of like really all these instances where someone has taken me, the naive person, under their wing and helped them out. There's this girl, this Finnish girl I met in Central America who was like, you work too much, I'm leaving. And that was sort of a wake up call about my work balance, because, that was probably back in like 2012. And so her being like, sorry, was like, wow, I've been doing this for 4 years, but I'm actually like not really traveling anymore. I'm just working in various places. So that was sort of like a wake up call to get back into the original reasons why I did this, to go travel and explore the world, not sit behind the computer and, wonder when can I get good Wi-Fi again?
It's tricky to create that balance though, isn't it? I mean, even I don't get to travel as much as I'd like to, but I still love the work I do. So I find that hard to balance sometimes because I'm just as happy to sit down at my computer and do some work because it's fun. So I imagine sometimes that's the same for you.
Yeah, I now have a new philosophy on it all, though. I
Teach
travel and then I work.
Right.
And because you can't do both at the same time. Now, I like working. I like my job. I like writing. So I don't mind, being in Rome and dipping into a cafe for a little bit and writing. Writing is, to me, is not really work. Work is like the emails, the podcast interviews, the marketing stuff that needs to be done. Writing I like to do, so I don't mind if I wake up early and write for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
But any other major project I won't do because if you're in exploring Rome and you're just thinking about work, you're not being present, you're not being a thoughtful traveler.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you're doing work and you're just hating the fact that you have to do work because you want to be out exploring Rome, your work is going to suffer. Yeah. So I found my sweet spot now is about 3 to 4 weeks. So I'll just kind of go away for about 3 to 4 weeks. And then I'll be like, okay, I really want to get work done. I have all these ideas. Let's start again. But if I'm going to be away longer, usually 5 is max before I get really itchy to go home. Mm-hmm. I'll spend extra time. So I'll go to Rome, but instead of doing Rome in 3-4 days, I'll do it 5-6. And I'll usually just have one day where I just sort of work. Right. And then all the other days, I'm just out exploring. Mm-hmm. Because I have found that there's no such thing as work-travel balance.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those work-life balance, work-travel balance, all of it's really a myth. Because I think what you said earlier on, that you can't do them both. I think you can try, but you can't do both well at the same time. And that's probably the same with any of these balances. It's better to be a bit more focused and then tilt your focus in another direction when it's time.
Exactly. There is something to be said about concentration. And I know in our very scattered world, our attention is everywhere, but your mind cannot be that many places at once. Yeah. It really works best when you're focused on one thing.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and something I often try and remind myself. So I will try and practice that more in the future. Now, you grew up in the US, and you obviously returned to the US, and now you're kind of based there more or less. But imagine if you were kicked out, let's say, and you had to live forever in one other country around the world. You've travelled so widely. Where would you choose, and why?
Do I have to be in this country for the rest of my life?
You're allowed to travel. I'd say you'd be allowed to travel a little bit, but you can be based. You have to be based somewhere.
To be based somewhere.
I know it's a tough choice. I've got a few at the top of my list, though.
I would probably go to New Zealand.
Ooh, interesting choice. Good one.
I just came from spending 4 months in Paris, and as much as I love Paris, I realized I didn't want to learn a new culture. Right? I didn't want to start over from scratch at my age. Yep. And there was no job that kept me there, and I was like, I could see myself spending a month or two in France every year, but for the rest of my life, too much. So New Zealand would be a great place because no language barrier, similar Anglo-ish culture, so we'd have at least some commonality among things. Ease of living. It was very actually hard to live in France. The bureaucracy is crazy. It was just things were complicated, whereas things are pretty easygoing in New Zealand. Lots of outdoor, beautiful parks and mountains and all that stuff. So clean air, water.
They have a great prime minister.
Yes, they do have a great prime minister. No more guns, which is nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think New Zealand sounds like a fabulous choice. And I know what you mean about learning a new culture. So I've just had a few weeks in Denmark, and there was so much I loved about it. But I got to know a couple of Americans who are living there, who are, my age and with kids, and they've moved there in the last few years. And they were all very positive about it. And in fact, it was two families with teenagers who I got to know separately, and they actually all want to stay, long term, basically. But that was the one thing of those cultural differences, and to, kind of break into having close friends and stuff is hard, once you're kind of not a student anymore, even, once you're in your 30s and 40s. I think it's harder to break into that local culture and really feel like you're home.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing if your work has taken you to Denmark, and now you have coworkers, and you have a way in, right? But if I'm just like, I'm going to move to Denmark and I'm going to live there, and I don't have coworkers to help me, or I didn't marry a Dane, some sort of into the culture, you're really starting from scratch. And while they speak English, like, you still need to learn Danish.
Yeah.
You still need to deal with the system that you don't understand. You have no guide. There's no Sherpa to like bring you along. You have to find friends. You got to find out where you find friends, not just travelers, but like friends, people who are like your neighbors. And there's also Danes love social clubs, but I just realized, like, I'm a couple of years from 40. It's like, is that what I want to do? If I don't have to do it?
Yeah.
Nah. When I moved to Bangkok and when I moved to Taipei, in my 20s, that was awesome. When I spent an extended time in Amsterdam, that was awesome. But, life changes.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I mean, when I was living abroad, I also kind of thought, oh, I want to do this forever. Then I came back here, and now I really see that in about 10 years, when my son's out of school, I would love to kind of be, I mean, my work is flexible. I would love to be, over in Europe for a couple of months, preferably right now during our winter, but, a couple of months in Europe, and then come back and, hang out with my friends and family back here, and then pop over to some, good Asian destination for a month and that kind of thing. But, I don't feel that pull to be permanently somewhere else anymore, mostly for those exact reasons you've said. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, when I came back from Paris, everyone was like, oh, you wrote you were moving there. And I was like, yeah, I did move there for 4 months.
Yeah.
But I don't have a job that keeps me there. So I tried the milk before I bought the cow, and I realized I only want to hang out with the cow a couple of times a year. Yes. I don't want to be a cow owner. And it was just, it was very hard to live in France by myself. Maybe if I was like 70 and my wife and I were just gonna like move to just Provence, like Peter Mailey did, that'd be a different story,
That's right.
But
not at this stage of life. I get that. I completely get that. Yeah. No, I understand. And, we're very lucky to have these options and choices. And how great, though, that you took the risk and tried it out, and now you know. I mean, that's, I think, the most important thing. You've always got to try these things. Otherwise, you never know.
Exactly. And one of the things living in Paris taught me was I really like space. I came from New York, which Paris got a lot more space. I had a kitchen that could fit a table. I mean, that's crazy talk for like, in New York.
Yeah.
I had windows with lots of natural light. And I was like, a man can get used to this kind of luxury. And so I realized I want more of this simple thing we call natural light. And I just, I'm going to move back to Austin, Texas, where
there's more natural light.
I can get a big place for not a lot of money, and there's actual light.
Yeah, no, I hear you, because I live in a great place here where I look out from my table and see the park across the road and lots of light streaming in, and I recognise every morning how much I love that. So, yeah, sometimes it's just the simple things. That's awesome. Now, I want to ask you a couple more things before we wrap up. So one thing is you get to travel solo a lot. I'm a little bit envious of that because I love solo travel, but I don't get the chance to do it very often. But I know a lot of people are often like nervous or, they're just not sure if they'll enjoy solo traveling. So what can you say to help convince them to try traveling solo?
I would say two things. One, an 18-year-old fresh out of high school, from some small town in England can do it. You can definitely do it.
That's such a good point. Yep.
Right. I mean, I met like people who were not very bright, let's just say, and they managed to get around the world just fine. And I was like, if they can do it, I can do it. And then two, you're not Magellan. You're not, Amelia Earhart trying to like cross the Pacific on the first time. You're not going to space. Like, you're not setting off into unknown lands. Yeah, unknown for you, but you can pull them up on Google Maps. There's roads. Millions and millions of other travelers have walked this path before you. So, remember that you're not the first one. Others have done it. It's not super scary. This isn't, sailing out into the Atlantic and thinking that the world is flat and you're going to fall off.
Yeah, it's all relative, isn't it? When you put it like that, it seems much more doable. And I've always found that people say, and my experience too, even if you are terrified the first time, once you do it, it really takes you 5 minutes to realize you can do it and it's all fine. And then you'll never look back.
Right. And let's remember that you think, I'll go travel the world alone. There's going to be no one. No, there's 20 other million people doing the same thing like you. And you're going to find them in the hostels, and they're going to be by themselves. They're not going to speak the local language. They're not going to have any friends. And they're going to want to hang out with someone. And that person's you. Yeah. And so, everyone in the hostel is just a different version of yourself.
Yeah.
And, it takes a little while to realize that. I went to the hostel the first time, and I was like, I don't like talking to people I don't know. I think I'll just stay here by myself. And then someone's like, hey, you want to join our group? And you're like, yes, I really do want to join your group. And then boom, you realize, wait, that wasn't so hard. I'm going to try this on my own in the next hostel. And it just gets easier and easier.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think everyone's out there having, most people, especially staying in a hostel, they have that mindset. They're keen to talk to someone. Sometimes, you might not be quite brave enough to make the first move, but you'll try it and it will work out because people are really open to it. So, I do love a good solo trip. Now, I also have another question for you. If you had not become a travel blogger, if 10 years ago something else had happened, where do you think life would have worked out for you now? What do you think you could have done instead?
I probably would have just come home and been a teacher. I went to school to be a teacher.
I don't think I knew that. What kind of teacher? High school or?
Yeah, high school history.
Oh, high school history. Yeah. That's also not a bad job.
Yeah, so that's probably what I would have done. But who's to say, if you had asked me 10 years ago, if you don't become a teacher, what job would you think you'd do? This would not be one I would even be on my radar.
Well, no, it didn't really exist then even, like as a permanent, job that that can pay all your bills. It's not something that we thought about even 10 years ago, really. So, yeah, it's I always look at my son who's 9 and people, he's 9. And so people always ask him, what are you going to be when you grow up? And he always says smartly, I don't know. And I always then say to him, yeah, who knows? The stuff that is going to be a job in 10, 20 years time, probably we don't know what it is yet. So just wait and see.
Yeah, exactly. This wasn't even a thing 10 years ago. The internet as a public tool is only 25 years old.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like you and I, we both started our websites for the purpose of being really a portfolio so that we could get jobs, other kinds of writing jobs. And, that's all we, even thought of it as back in the day. So, yeah, who would have known this? Yeah. Aren't we lucky too that it's worked out this way because we get to do all these cool things?
Exactly.
Now, looking towards the future, what kind of big dreams or goals do you have for your traveling future? Have you got some, fantastic travel ideas in mind?
Nope. Well, I have a book coming out shortly called 10 Years of Nomad. So I'll be traveling around the U.S. and Canada for 6 weeks promoting that book. But after that, I'm just going to chill at home. I'm going to go find a place in Austin with lots of light and space and settle into a new apartment.
Oh, that does sound lovely. Very nice. I know a bit about it, but just for the benefit of my listeners, can you just tell me a little bit about 10 Years of Nomad?
Yeah, so the book is about my 10 years backpacking the world, hence the title, 10 Years of Nomad. And it starts in 2006, ends in 2016, and it's sort of my opus on travel. It is not only the story of me and, stories from the road and all that, but it's sort of lessons I've learned, thoughts on how to be a better traveler, advice, tips, in the sense that, you could pick this up and read the section on planning, put it down, or you can keep reading. So it follows sort of the arc of an around the world trip. So you really get the emotional journey of what it's like to, wake up one day and decide to quit your job, travel the world, and how does that go? What's it like coming home? What's it like going back out, living in other places, making friends on the road, living in foreign cultures. So it really explores what it's like to be a nomad, and the lessons from that, and the lessons, I learned and over the years, and how what I thought travel was when I was 25 is much different than what I think it is right now, and how that can sort of make you a better traveler. A more thoughtful traveler, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I was just reading the first chapter first section where you arrive in Costa Rica, your first solo trip, and the way you describe being at the airport and, thinking maybe I'll just turn around and go home. I, don't know, looking for a driver to take me to the hotel. This is all very stressful. And all of those moments that I think we all go through, it was very, very relatable. And I think, like you say, talking about all those lessons that you learn over your traveling life, and probably you like me, I didn't set out to travel because I thought it would teach me a lot of things or make me a better person. But the more you go along, the more you realize how good travel is for you. And then you start to really, kind of tease out those lessons, and it does make you, well, I hope it has made me a better person. And I'm sure you feel the same. And I got the sense that there's a lot of that in your book as well, which I'm excited to read more of.
Yeah, I just started out because I met some backpackers and it seemed like a cool thing to do, and you get to meet people and party around the world. I had no grand plans. I was like, okay, I'll do a year abroad and then I'll get a real job. It just kept on going. But, being a 25-year-old party person is one thing. Being a 30 or 38-year-old traveler after 13 years is another thing, and your perspective changes.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can't party if you're older, or you can't be thoughtful if you're young. I think it really goes to what is your intention. I never understood, whether now or 13 years ago, why people just traveled halfway around the world to only drink. It's
yeah, I know, it's a really expensive way to do it.
Yeah, you're gonna just burn through your cash, getting drunk on, in Cairns and up the east coast of Australia, seems kind of a waste, man.
Yeah, I agree.
Just, yeah, but, so it's about that.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to your book as well, so that everyone can check it out. But it's been lovely to chat to you, Matt. Thank you very much for coming on the Thoughtful Travel podcast, and good luck with the book launch and your book tour. And I look forward to seeing what the future holds for you, and what other future books are in your traveling future.
What other books are in my traveling future?
Yeah, have you got? Do you think you'll continue to not pump out books, but continue to write?
Yeah, I hope so. The story, I don't have any stories in my mind. I have some beginning ideas that may come to fruition. They may not, but I'd like to write a couple more books.
That sounds good. Well, I'm sure you will, and I look forward to hearing about them in the future. So thanks again. It's been really great to chat.
Thanks for having me on your podcast.
So there we go. A few lessons and tips in there, I hope, for everybody from Matt. And I learned a few things too. I didn't know he trained to be a high school history teacher, which I find fascinating because that would also be a cool kind of job, I reckon, at least to some extent. I know teachers work crazy hard, too hard, but there you go. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to episode 147 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. A big thanks to Matt for doing this interview with me, and you can find him at nomadicmatt.com. And in the show notes, I'll also leave a link to his new book, 10 Years a Nomad, which I think is going to be a great read. I've previewed the first couple of chapters on Amazon and they sound fabulous. Come over and join us in our Facebook group. We chat about all kinds of thoughtful travel issues there and have a lot of fun. Just look for Thoughtful Travelers in Facebook, or there's a link in the show notes as well. And today's show notes you can find at notaballerina.com/147. Thank you very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.